My name is Emily, and I'm in my early 30s. You won't believe the crazy roller coaster that became my life. Sit tight, because I'm about to spill the tea on how I turned the tables on my so-called family-in-law. Once upon a time, in a land filled with sparkling lies and deceit, I met my husband, Daniel, when he was admitted to the hospital where I worked as a doctor. He was a charming and charismatic man, and despite being 5 years younger than me, he seemed mature and dependable. We got married after a year of dating. He was a vice president at his family's company, and his parents were thrilled about our marriage. They believed that my family's hospital, which my parents founded, was a gold mine. My in-laws used to be so kind to me. Every year during Christmas and long holidays, we'd visit their house, and they'd welcome us warmly. I'd bring delicious food and drinks as gifts, and my mother-in-law would take the lead in cooking. I always looked forward to these visits, but one day, everything changed. As my husband and I arrived at the house, my mother-in-law greeted us with a fake smile. Little did I know that she had a sinister plan up her sleeve. She invited my husband inside, but as I tried to enter, she gave me a venomous glare and snapped, "You're not needed here." With that, she slammed the door shut in my face. I was completely taken aback by this sudden coldness. Gently, I opened the door to find her glaring at me with fury in her eyes. She accused my parents of being in debt and claimed that we didn't need a wife like that. It was the first time I had experienced such coldness from them. My parents had recently discussed closing our family's hospital due to my father's deteriorating health, but there was no mention of debt. A week before this fateful visit, my husband and I had a conversation about it, but I had to leave for an emergency at the hospital before we could continue. I suspect my husband must have exaggerated our conversation, thinking my parents' hospital was closing because of debts. He likely told his parents, which led to the icy treatment I received. My mother-in-law's cold demeanor was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Lost in my thoughts and heading home, I heard my husband's phone ringing from the bag I had taken with me. It turns out I had driven off with his belongings still in the car. His phone was ringing non-stop, and I had never looked at his phone before, but thinking it might be urgent, I decided to check. I pulled over, took out his phone, and tried a few passwords. Knowing my husband's aversion to complexity, I figured it wouldn't be too hard to guess. It unlocked with his birthday, and the caller was a woman named Sarah, a name I hadn't heard before. Checking the message history, I found numerous exchanges with Sarah, and the messages were shocking. "I want to see you soon. I wish I could be with Sarah forever. I'll be with my wife during the New Year holidays. I'll miss you once I get the money. I plan to leave her really. That makes me happy. I love Sarah the most." It seemed my husband had been cheating on me. I was devastated. I had thought of my husband, father-in-law, and mother-in-law as kind-hearted people. But as I dug deeper, I discovered photos of my husband with Sarah from a trip, along with hotel receipts and other shocking discoveries. Unable to come to terms with this betrayal, I decided to visit my parents' house. When I rang the doorbell, my mother, who was equally shocked and concerned, opened the door. She asked me why I was there so late and noticed the distress on my face. Tears streamed down my cheeks, and she quickly wrapped me in a warm blanket. My father sensed something was wrong and asked what happened. I told them about my in-laws and their terrible behavior. My mother was shocked, and my father was furious, declaring, "It's so terrible, ungrateful people." My father suggested that I should play along for a while and see their true colors, which seemed intriguing at the time. The next day, I decided to return to my in-laws' house and shouted at the entrance, "I'm sorry for being a mature wife. Please let me in." To win their favor, I brought various gourmet ingredients and fine wine as gifts. Eventually, I gained entry into the house. My mother-in-law, seeing the luxurious gifts, marked her territory, and my father-in-law and husband gave me cold stares. They revealed that they had only treated me well because they believed my family was wealthy. Now that they thought my family's hospital was drowning in debt, they expected me to work hard as a wife. From then on, the harassment towards me was relentless. My mother-in-law kicked me into the kitchen, where I prepared dishes using the ingredients I had brought. I served them, and my father-in-law, mother-in-law, and husband eagerly devoured everything. But when I tried to eat, my mother-in-law slapped my hand, causing my fork to drop. She scolded me for sitting and accused me of thinking I was eating with them. According to her, housekeepers eat leftovers in the kitchen. I was stunned and replied, "So I'm a housekeeper now?" How dare you talk back with all your debts? My husband joined in saying, do you feel the same way, John? I never liked your arrogant attitude, Nancy. I tolerated it because I thought your family was wealthy. Listen to Mom, and I'll keep you around as a housekeeper. Hearing my husband's true feelings was a devastating blow. I had hoped he was just going along with his parents, but that hope was shattered. He had married me for my family's supposed wealth and had been pretending all along. My husband's current behavior revealed his true nature. I ended up eating leftovers in the cold kitchen and was left with a mountain of dirty dishes. It was a terrible story, especially in the freezing winter, washing dishes with icy water. It was so cold that my whole body trembled. When I asked for a bed, my mother-in-law pointed to a shed with no heating or bed and said, "Where is the bed?" "What, you think you're getting a bed? There are old towels and cardboard in the shed. Make do." I finally understood their true nature. Thankfully, I had recorded their abusive words and had no more business in this house. That night, in the freezing shed, my anger towards my father-in-law, mother-in-law, and husband kept me warm, and I vowed never to forgive them. Late at night, after they drunkenly passed out, I drove back to my parents' house. After a good night's sleep, I was packing the next morning when the door burst open, and my mother-in-law and husband stormed in. They demanded to know why I was leaving without making breakfast. I was done with both of them and firmly replied, "I am done with both of you. How dare you talk back to your mother-in-law and husband? You're even worse than I thought. We can divorce if you want, but if you initiate it, you will pay compensation. Maybe you can sell the hospital's land. It should fetch a good price. We'll take that." I said it sarcastically, but my husband just smirked, thinking he had the upper hand. He threw a paper at me, and it was a pre-filled divorce application. He thought he had me cornered, saying, "If you don't do as I say, I'll use this." I couldn't believe his audacity. I replied, "Good, this clears things up for me. What, did you think I would beg you not to leave me with a bankrupt hospital and drowning in debt? I have no choice but to cling to you, right?" He was completely mistaken, and while it's true that my father retired and closed the current hospital, we planned to relocate to a new facility near the train station. My brother and I would work there, with me as the director. Far from being in debt, we had more than enough assets. Upon hearing this, my husband and mother-in-law turned pale. My husband panicked, realizing the gravity of his mistake, and he said, "Nancy, I'm sorry. I should have defended you from Mom. I promise to protect you from now on." I couldn't help but retort, "You mean protect Sarah, right?" He was shocked and asked, "How did you know about Sarah?" I revealed the truth, saying, "You were cheating while pretending to work late. I have all the evidence." I showed him the photos and email exchanges on my phone. He stared at the evidence, sweating profusely. "You will be the one paying compensation. Sarah was just a fling. I met her at a bar. I'll break up with her. Please forgive me." I wasn't going to let him off the hook so easily. I showed him a photo of a life insurance policy taken out on me and a detailed pamphlet about car maintenance. There was a marked section about tampering with car brakes. I said, "That's not all," and he started to apologize, looking miserable. I continued, "I showed him a photo of a life insurance policy taken out on me and a detailed pamphlet about car maintenance. There was a marked section about tampering with car brakes." At this point, my husband realized the gravity of his actions and begged me for forgiveness. But I was not ready to forgive or forget. My husband was not the only one I confronted that day. I also showed the evidence to my father-in-law, and he was petrified. My father-in-law's business, which was already struggling, went bankrupt with a mountain of debt. My husband, mother-in-law, and father-in-law now lived in an old apartment, juggling multiple part-time jobs but struggling to keep up with their debts. As for me, I got a divorce and received compensation from my husband and Sarah, the woman he cheated with. My husband had kept begging to get back together, but when I threatened to consult the police, he stopped coming around. Through a lawyer, I demanded repayment of the $100,000 my father had lent to my father-in-law's company, and it was safely returned. My husband and I were officially divorced, and I was ready to start anew. My father-in-law's company was in shambles, and I was slowly reclaiming my life. I began working as the director of a newly built hospital with my brother's help. Our mission was to help those suffering from injuries and illnesses. It was a fulfilling endeavor, and every day was a new opportunity to make a difference. I bought a comfortable apartment near the hospital and was finally enjoying living my own life. It was a journey filled with pain and betrayal, but in the end, I emerged stronger and more determined than ever. Life moved on, and I found solace in my work and the support of my family. The newly built hospital was thriving, and my brother and I were dedicated to providing the best care possible for our patients. Every day was a reminder that I had made the right choice in pursuing my passion for healing and helping others. As time passed, I became more resilient, and the wounds from my past started to heal. The pain of betrayal, the coldness of my in-laws, and the heartbreak of my failed marriage gradually faded into the background. What had once felt like an insurmountable storm had transformed into a mere drizzle, and I was no longer drowning in despair. My life had taken a turn for the better, and I relished the newfound freedom and independence. I reveled in the simple pleasures of living alone, making choices for myself, and charting my own path. The weight of expectations from my previous life had been lifted, and I was free to be me, unburdened by the false hopes and dreams my ex-husband and his family had projected onto me. I also had the satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served. My father-in-law, once a proud and seemingly successful businessman, had fallen from grace, buried under the weight of his own debts. My husband, the man who had used me as a means to an end, had learned that actions have consequences. While I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness for the way their lives had unraveled, I knew deep down that they had brought their downfall upon themselves. They had underestimated me, thinking that they could manipulate and control me to their advantage. Little did they know that I had a strength they had never anticipated. The compensation I received from my divorce and the repayment of the loan my father had extended to my ex-father-in-law's company served as a form of justice. It was a reminder that even in the face of adversity, I had the power to stand up for myself and protect my interests. With each passing day, I continued to heal and grow stronger. The lessons I had learned from my past experiences had made me more resilient, more aware, and more determined to live life on my own terms. I was no longer defined by the expectations and illusions of others, but by my own desires and aspirations. The scars from my past had faded, but they were not forgotten. They served as a reminder of the strength and resilience that had carried me through the darkest moments of my life. As I embraced my new beginning, I was determined to let go of the pain and bitterness that had once consumed me. Forgiveness, I realized, was not about condoning the wrongs that had been done to me. It was about freeing myself from the shackles of anger and resentment. I understood that holding on to grudges would only keep me tethered to the past, preventing me from fully enjoying the present and building a brighter future. With this newfound perspective, I made the choice to forgive my ex-husband and my former in-laws. Not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace and happiness. I didn't want to carry the heavy burden of anger with me any longer. It wasn't an easy journey, and forgiveness didn't come overnight. I had to confront the pain, acknowledge the betrayal, and work through the emotions that had haunted me. I sought therapy to help me navigate the complex feelings that came with forgiving those who had hurt me. Over time, I began to let go of the past, piece by piece. I forgave my ex-husband for his betrayal and his role in the deception. I forgave my former in-laws for their coldness and cruelty. I forgave not for their sake, but for my own. Forgiveness allowed me to reclaim my life and my happiness. It was liberating to release the heavy burdens I had carried for so long. I found a sense of inner peace and tranquility that I had never experienced before. With my heart unburdened, I focused on the present and the future. I threw myself into my work at the hospital, driven by a renewed sense of purpose. Every patient I helped heal and every life I touched was a reminder that I was on the right path. I also rekindled the relationships with my family, strengthening the bonds that had been strained during the tumultuous period of my marriage. My parents, who had always supported me, were relieved to see me moving forward and finding happiness on my own terms. As I continued to build my life, I couldn't help but wonder about the woman my ex-husband had cheated on me with, Sarah. I often wondered if she had experienced the same betrayal and if she, too, had found the strength to move on. I had no desire to seek revenge or contact her, but I hoped she had found her own path to healing and happiness. Life was not without its challenges, but I faced them with a newfound resilience and a sense of purpose. I was no longer defined by the past, but rather, I was forging a future filled with hope and possibility. My story was far from over, and I looked forward to each new chapter with a sense of optimism and determination.